Hello, I'm Thomas Hare, Chief Content Officer of the Performance-Driven Marketing Institute, a not-for-profit trade association that serves companies in the performance and direct-to-consumer marketing world. Welcome to the latest episode of Take 20, created by the PDMI's Brand Response Council. These 20-minute live conversations featuring leaders in the performance marketing world speaking about the hottest topics in the industry are scheduled twice a month. Before we get to today's conversation, a quick housekeeping note. We'll be addressing any questions from the audience at the end of the session. You don't have to wait to ask them. Utilize the questions tab on your control panel to type and send your question in. We'll be collecting them and we'll try to get to as many as possible in the final moments of this episode. Today's episode, the PDMI Summer Reading List, welcomes this quintet of council members who are here to give you some food for thought. Traditionally, summer vacation has become a time to grab a chair and a book while away the days poolside or on the sand. Sometimes, though, those lazy, hazy beach books can all seem to run together. Sometimes you want to read something a little bit more edgy, a little bit more inspiring. Today, this group will share their most recent reads that push them to improve as business experts and leaders. As always, we welcome our moderator and chair of the PDMI Brand Response Council, Modern Postcard's Chris Foster, who's already given me a 0 for not bringing a book today, as well as Dave Futterman, Vice President of Digital Ad Sales at Paramount, Sean Robertson, Vice President, Direct to Scale at NBCU, Gregory Silvano, CEO of Buyist, and Cody Tunney, Executive Vice President of Analytics at Yangaroo. Team, Chris, take it away.
Great, thanks so much, Thomas, for the introduction, and thank you everybody here for being a part of this and participating. One of the things that happens with professionals is we're talking about ways to grow, and oftentimes the channel for that conversation is hard to find. Where do you start? How did you grow? It's kind of a hard answer, hard question to answer when you're put on the spot, but oftentimes the lessons of growth are revealed through the books we read, through the actions we take, and the things that we experience. And sharing these experiences is a way, a vehicle for you to communicate how you've been growing, and that inspires other people too. The beautiful thing about our business is that it's by people, connecting with people, and learning from people. And so I do believe that together we can all get better. So that's the premise for this topic today, and we've got some great books that everybody's read. And really, we're going to talk about which books kind of strike personally, but then how does that impact your business life, right? Because we are people, transformations that we undergo personally always express themselves in some way in our profession, right? At this level and at this kind of time of profession, usually the work life and your personal life interweave in many ways, right? We don't separate themselves from that. So how do these lessons then apply in our vocation and in our careers, and how do the different journeys that we take blend into our career journey? So I'm going to get started with that in mind. And the book that I wanted to share with you all is a book called The Biggest Bluff: How I Learned to Pay Attention, Master Myself, and Win. This is by Maria Konnikova. So a quick backstory. She's a writer for the New Yorker magazine, living in New York. Her husband lost her job. Her mom lost her job. And suddenly she had an entire family dependent upon her income as a freelance writer for the New Yorker living in New York. Clearly that's a challenge. And so she was trying to figure out how she was going to make ends meet. And she touched on a story where she read about a poker guru. And wanted to understand poker a little bit. And so as she started to move into this world to write a story about it, she realized that this was a whole world in which she could learn how to master herself better. And she said, okay, I'm going to dive in. So for a year plus, she decided to become a professional poker player. She'd never played poker before. And so she reached out to some mentors, and most mentors were thinking about people who were counting cards and calculations, but she was a psychology major, and she really wanted to understand the psychology of poker, not necessarily to outwit opponents, that's part of it, but mostly how to pay attention to all the cues and all the clues given. And so what I found most interesting about this book is I know zero about poker, and she talks about Texas Hold'em, which is an all-in kind of raw type of poker where you've got cards that you can see and you've got cards that you don't see, and then you have cards that your opponents have that you can see and cards you can't see. So instantly in an environment there are knowns and there are unknowns. And what I started to think about this, where it really impacted me of how I viewed the business, was during COVID. So Modern Postcard is a direct marketing company. The bell curve of our customer base at the high end are very large enterprise DTC brands. At the low end are small businesses. But the middle of that bell curve are these mid-market businesses, and a lot of them struggled with COVID, and marketing budgets were the first things to get cut or reduced when COVID happened because they were trying to make payroll, right? So it affected our business, and we adjusted. But what we were telling the team, and what I was conveying to the team, but had a poor expression for it, was I said there are certain things we can't control, right? Inflation is out of our control. Monetary Fed policy, completely out of our control. Supply chain issues, completely out of our control. But there are things that are in our control in terms of our culture, in terms of our work process, in terms of our operational efficiencies, in terms of how we market and how we message. And so what I liked about this book is that it gave a lot of clarity and phrasing about the cards that you have on the table and how much you're willing to invest in a certain hand or a certain strategy based on the information you have and the information you don't have. And so what she goes into is, yes, bluffing, but a lot of that is the confidence of the knowledge you have and the risk you're willing to take driven by the knowledge you don't have, right? And the other thing she talked about, which I really liked, was this concept of luck. Where luck is this pernicious, superstitious thing that gets in people's head. Either you're lucky or unlucky, or luck's going to fall on me, or luck doesn't fall on me. And what she realized was that luck, as we phrase it, is this combination of the knowns and unknowns and the confidence you have in navigating that. Whether you feel underconfident, and there are times when if you do feel underconfident, don't act. Right? If you feel more confident about the hand you have and the situation that you can read, then move forward and ahead, right? And one of the things that came through was the idea of paying attention. And I know it's a big, broad phrase, but pay attention. Pay attention to what's happening in digital advertising. Pay attention to changing response rates for different marketing channels. Why? Because we can speak to that in our messaging. Pay attention to supply chain issues with paper. Why? So we can get ahead of our clients who are expecting a big long run and ask them to plan ahead so that we can organize that, right? And I know it might sound fundamental, but this concept of paying attention works micro and macro. And it also helps you think about how you want to be with the knowledge that you have. And so I'll pull out one pull quote from this, which I liked. Where she says it's about confidence and loss of confidence as she was going into a round, really stressed about performing well and figuring out how she's going to actually approach that table. And a process known as embodied cognition. You embody the feeling you want to express, and your mind and body will fall into alignment. You channel your outer warrior, and your inner one may not be long in coming out. Right? It's another way to express, hey, dress for the person you want to be, right? Or it's think about the business that you want to be, knowing all the information that you have, and then suddenly you instinctively make the motions in the organization to get to that place in the business. So, for example, for Modern Postcard, we ended up shifting, and I really wanted to drive the strategy for our business to be of more marketing services. We work directly with agencies. We work with a ton of agencies, and so we don't want to compete with them. We want to cooperate with them. But we also have clients who don't have an agency, but need some level of service for their marketing guidance and their marketing strategy. And so we said, that's the place where we can go strategically to add more value, especially during these COVID times when not only do they shave marketing budgets, but maybe marketing personnel. So it helped us in a lot of ways and helped me rethink our business in a lot of ways. And what I love about it too, it was completely unexpected, right? I heard an interview with her on NPR, and I said, she is freaking bomb. She is so smart. It was a Radio Lab thing, and I picked up the book, and I was like, this is the one that I dog ear. This is the one that I write in. This is the one that I reread, and this is the one that I refer to. So Highly recommend. The Biggest Bluff by Maria Konnikova. And that's my share for the summer reading list. David, off to you.
Awesome job, Chris. So for anyone who knows me, you could expect I chose a bit of a different type of book. The book that I chose today is Ultra Marathon Man by Dean Karnazes. Dean is both my favorite author and my favorite athlete. He's run 50 marathons in 50 states in 50 consecutive days. He ran 148 miles in 24 hours, and all 148 of those were on a treadmill. And he's run 350 miles without sleep. Quite impressive. But this book is more about that. It's about focus, determination, and preparation. For me, Dean and this book are proof that anything is possible, and we can overcome any obstacle. I read this book annually, and every time I read it, it reminds me that these principles, focus, determination, and preparation, should be applied both at work and personal lives. I've met Dean. He is absolutely incredible, and the energy that surrounds him is just so motivating, and that's what I love so much about this book. So to offer you my favorite quote from the book, run when you can. Walk if you must. Just never give up. So I highly recommend this for anyone looking for either motivation, a fun read, or that just wants to get into long distance running. And that's how I found this. Thank you so much, Chris and team.
Thank you, Dave. Quick question before you go. Are you a runner?
Sure. Say it again.
Are you a runner?
Yes, so I have completed 8 marathons, about 12 half Ironman, and 1 full Ironman. I love it.
Congratulations. That's very
Thank you.
well done. So my other question, how do you train in wintertime in New York City?
You just do it, especially with this bald head. I got to wear hat, glove, and you just do it. It's all about the focus, preparation, and determination.
Awesome. Last question. Did you know that San
Sure.
Diego was home of the very first triathlon, and we would always welcome you out here to participate in one?
Let's schedule PDMI around it, and I'll be there.
Excellent. That was wonderful. Ultra Marathon by David Carvey?
By Dan Karnazes. Yep, and they call him Carno.
Awesome. Thank you. That was wonderful. Greg,
Thank
looks
you,
like you're next over on my round table.
All right, we're going in order of however, what are we in? Go to meeting, lined us up. All right, so mine is called Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller, right? So I read a lot of books last year. This is actually the one that kicked it off. I went through a reading spree where a client recommended this and another book from Donald Miller called Marketing Made Simple. So the reason, before I get into it, can't recommend this book enough. It is the book. I've probably bought about 20 copies of these, and I send them to people. I send them to clients and new customers. The reason this came about for me and why it was important was I'm a software guy. I own a software company. We do e-commerce, right? I'm not at all a marketing person, yet every one of our clients are marketing people, right? Everybody who's using our platform and selling things, they are arguably the greatest marketers on earth. So while I can see the results, I don't always kind of understand why they're doing what they do or what the difference is between a campaign that's working and not working. So it was nice to start getting down. I ended up reading about 20 different marketing books last year. And what I'm going to do to kind of explain this book is I'm going to read the first 5 sentences because he does a really, really good job of kind of driving. It's in the introduction. He says, this is not, I'm 50 years old now, right? So I'm going to hold this back. This is not a book about telling your company's story. A book like that would be a waste of time. Customers don't generally care about your story. They care about their own. And that is the entire premise of the book. Your customer should be the hero of the story, not your brand. This is the secret that every phenomenally successful business understands. And what follows is a 7-part framework that will change the way you talk about your business and perhaps the way you do business. And that is the takeaway from the book. And this is the quote that I give everybody when I talk about it, is that the hero of your website, right? We do websites. The hero of your campaign, your marketing campaign, your product, your brand is not you. Nobody cares about you. And I say it just like that. It's not about us and about our founders and here's our story. That shouldn't be on your website. People don't care. The hero of the website is the visitor, and you and your brand or your product are there to help them solve their problem. And that's what this is all about. And he goes through a 7-part series, seven elements that every great story has. And again, whether this is a product or a brand or services you have, and it's simple. A character has a problem, meets a guide, which is your brand or your product, who gives them a plan and calls them to action, helps them avoid failure, and ends in success. Now, and this whole book is only 200 pages, right? So a super short book, easy to read. If you read that, it just described every infomercial that's ever been created. They all start the same way, right? There's a person and it's in black and white and they're having a problem opening their chapstick. And it's like, oh no, are you tired of having your chapstick not open when you want it, right? And, well, we have a solution. And it works, and it's always worked. They literally follow this process. So awesome, awesome book, super easy to read, really, really clear. I think that's really it. I mean, it's highly recommended. Super good book.
I echo that. That book transformed a lot of what we did, and I ended up through that and some other resources. And the class that I teach at UCSD, I talk about storytelling a lot. So I ended up creating a storytelling for business webinar. It's
awesome.
Super popular. Hundreds of people show up every time we do it, because what you just talk about, I love on a business side, because you want to apply it to business. But I love it because it's so human. And what I told my students, and even before I read this book, and this book really, really crystallizes it, is that there's a lot of conflict in the world. There's always been conflict, gang. That's not new. Newsflash. We've always been in conflict. But there's one thing human beings from all countries and all ages and every ethnicity agree on. Everybody loves a good story with compelling characters.
Yep.
Everyone.
Yep. And there's a method to it. That's the key. And part of the book is he talks about Star Wars or Hunger Games. Well, not talks about them, but shows them in a diagram and literally shows the characters. It puts them to those 7 elements. And you can see, yep, that's exactly how. And he actually says at one point, he's like, I'm going to ruin every movie for the rest of your life by explaining this, because they all do the same thing.
Yeah, it's
journey. Hero's journey. It's a great way to tell the story.
Yeah,
I want a chapstick opener now. I didn't know I needed one, but Greg, when you did that story, I'm game.
So if you want to go super old school off of what Gregory's recommendations were, one is Winning the Story Wars, and if you want to go to the core, it's The Hero of 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell.
Oh, cool.
That describes through the myth and mythology how Gregory just talked about it, from Pride and Prejudice to Beowulf. It's the same story.
Yeah.
It's the same stuff. So Gregory, that is awesome. That is a titan of a recommendation. Wonderful. Cody, you're up in the swing next.
Oh, all right. Well, I don't know how I'm going to follow Greg with this, but because my book is a little bit nerdy. So the book that I'm recommending, and apologies, I don't have it physically. I think I've given it away, or it's ended up in my kids' bookshelf. But the book that really made an impact on me was called Introduction to Programmatic Advertising. It's quite simple. It explains exactly what it is. It's by Dominic Corrison. And you can get it on Amazon. It's somewhere between 10 and 20 bucks. But the reason why this book had such a profound impact on me is in about 2016, 2017, somewhere like that, I returned to work after being on maternity leave. And the whole industry had moved into this like digital space where everyone's talking. They're the experts of the DSP and the SSP and the DMP. And I came from a linear world, and I'm like, what is everybody talking about? Like I felt totally left behind. And I think, people who do have maternity leave, or they exit the industry for a little while, they come back, and it's like, it just changes, right? So this book, I was talking to one of my former colleagues. Her name was Tiffany Shreen, and she's a professor now at FIT and Manhattan Community College. She recommended this book to me because she recommends it to her students. It's about 150 pages, and it outlines, both with words and with diagrams, the whole programmatic ecosystem and what happens, the pings, going from different vendors, who's playing in the marketplace, who's governing this process, who's using it. And it really helped me get back into my game. I've used the book as a reference for sales training seminars, for consulting projects where people are also in the same boat as I was once in. And it really helped me level up my understanding of both linear and digital advertising. So that's the book that I'd like to recommend. And then also, on a separate note, this is apart from my personal book recommendation, is that this is, doing book recommendations is something that we do as part of Yangaroo's DEI program. So every quarter we save space for about 5 people to be interviewed, or to recommend the book of their choice, educational, professional, and it allows us to kind of cross divisions and cross job roles and relate to each other on something, a different level other than, our day-to-day job. And we've found that really beneficial. Chris, I think you're on mute.
I love the idea of institutionalizing. No, I love the idea of institutionalizing the learning, but not doing it in a draconian way and letting the people decide what to do. It fosters employee engagement. It gets the people to own it. That's good leadership on your team. And also, Cody, I love it that you're reading as a textbook. It's fabulous, right? I mean, we stop reading textbooks, but I'm like, well, why would I stop reading textbooks if I want to learn about something? That's the go-to place to do it.
Yeah.
And I also think what I love about it is now we know more about you, right? David Futterman was talking about focus, determination, and preparation. Here you come out after maternity leave, knowing that you need to level up your understanding of this brave new world. And instead of floundering, you had focus with determination. You prepared yourself by actually reading a textbook. So it really speaks to, I think, your diligence and your responsibility and your ownership of your own career path. So
thank you.
A+. John, I'm so excited to have you finish up and take us out.
Yeah. And before I get started, I mean, Cody, I think that's a sign of a good book when you give it away a couple of times and you buy another one. That lets you know you got a pretty good book. I do have my little prop here today. Extreme Ownership. The author, one of the 2 authors, Jocko Willink, pretty famous American retired SEAL, and his co-author, Leif Babin, both SEALs that served in Iraq. And Jocko tells a story in this book about the Battle of Ramadi, but also serving his time in Iraq and how he led our SEAL forces over there, right? So he'd never been in battle before. And the book opens up with a battle kicking off when he realizes that something's off. His gut's telling him something's not right. And he starts peeling back the onion, lets you know that there was another set of SEAL snipers that were supposed to be in a location not too far from there. And they have a tank, an A1 Abram, that's pivoting its turret right towards this building where they were taking on fire. And I'll rush to the punchline. What they realized is that it was near fratricide, essentially blue on blue. They were nearly American fighting forces about to take on American fighting forces because of miscommunication. And typically when that happens, that means somebody's going to get relieved of duty. In our business, that's called getting fired. And as he's sent back to the base and he's told to cease all missions and all activity, and the investigator is being sent to the base and his boss is coming on out, and he starts dissecting on his own what happened, where everything went wrong, and gets everybody who was involved in the mission in a room And he starts asking what happened. And in true Navy SEAL fashion, everybody raised their hand. And one of the snipers said, listen, I should have positively identified my target. I failed to do that. And one of the platoon leaders said, well, I should have positioned my guys and should have waited a little bit more. And everybody takes ownership of their part. And ultimately, this is early on in his tenure over in Iraq, and why he didn't get dismissed or relieved of duty was when the investigation started to kick off and he was in the room with the big bosses now. He takes extreme ownership and says, listen, irrespective of what everybody else tells you, this is where I failed, right? Should have had better communication, should have coordinated and recognized that we had 2 different platoons. Even though I didn't know their exact location, we should have just taken our time. And ultimately, while his actions prevented any, fatalities, there was an Iraqi soldier, I should say, that was killed. No American fatalities. An American soldier was fragged in the face, so received some shrapnel to the face and was damaged, but ultimately recovered. But his ownership that he showed really took everybody by surprise, because it's typical, right, that you start looking for where everybody else did their job, failed to do their job. And if you're going to be a leader, and some of the best leaders that we have are in our U.S. military, I have a great deal of reverence and respect for our military. This time of the year, I typically start to read a book. I think it started with my dad. When I first graduated, he gave me my first, read this on the train to work sort of deal. I was 22 years old. He gave me a book. It's Semper Fi, Business Leadership the Marine Corps Way. And much in the way that book took Marine Corps teachings and applied it to business, one of the interesting things about these 2 authors, former SEALs, is that they have a consulting company, Echelon Front. So they take the military mission, the real life battlefield example, and they apply it to business, real life business examples where they, they give you anonymous or they, make it a little bit more generic, but they tell you about a business engagement that they had, the problem, and how they took the lessons from the battlefield into the boardroom. So that really resonates with me. And so this is actually my second time reading this book. It was given to me by a proctor that I had at a leadership training module that I had during my years at Dish. And they really take leadership very seriously, and they do a good job of training managers and leaders of people. But the follow-up book hit my reading list this summer, so I picked it up, finished that at the beginning of June. And so many references touched on this book that I picked it back up again. And I'm just as enthralled. I love the stories. It's and we often joke in our business, like, it's not brain surgery, we're not saving lives. But if we take a step back and we do recognize we work in a multi-billion-dollar business, that really the success and failure of a lot of our brands and our clients really depend on how well we do our jobs. And those businesses are the livelihoods of our clients, right? They're families that are provided for, education, healthcare, all that stems from this business that we're fortunate enough to take part in. So while it's not warfare, there is a high stakes sort of activity happening. And it's a good gut check for me to think about how I'm leading people, how I'm holding myself accountable, how I'm communicating as somebody on a team who's being led, because that's also one of the tenets of the book. Is essentially, how do you communicate as a team leader? And one of my favorite quotes from the book, and it took me a while to sing it because, me being me, and much like David said, if you know me, I'm pretty strong-willed. There's a quote that says, there are no bad teams, there are only bad leaders. And if you think back on any teams you participate in, you're like, nah, there could be some bad teams. But he gives an example in the book, at Bud's training, when he first was done with battlefield engagement, and was put in charge of, and you're out in San Diego, so he was put in charge of the Bud's training out there in San Diego. And for those who aren't familiar, that's after Hell Week, and you're training your Navy SEALs. But he's got these 6 different teams of SEALs that he's training. And the smallest group is always called the Smurf, but then every other team, they'll have a boat number. So boat number 2, they were shorter guys, smaller in stature, but they're crushing the competition. Every time they have a competition, they got to carry the boat everywhere they go, through the sand, into the surf, out the surf, cold conditions, the cold breeze of San Diego in the evening, or early in the morning. They're training morning, noon, and night. And so team 2 is crushing it, and team 6 is dragging. They're last in everything. And each leader, team 2 is obviously led by a very strong boat leader. And team 6, you know, the body language, he's yelling at his team, he's not taking any ownership. So they did something pretty radical, and this is Jacko leading the training. He swaps the 2 different leaders of the boat crew. And what does she know? All of a sudden, team 2 continues to be high performing. And the team boat leader of boat 6, who thought, oh, no, look at my luck now, it's changed. I finally am giving a team worthy of my leadership. They're still competitive, right? There's still 1 or 2, but every time competing for that first spot is now boat 6. So the worst boat crew all of a sudden jumps up in performance because they had the right kind of leadership. And he was in a position to train the team where your team member's weak, you need to be strong. Where he's strong, you know, or essentially, how do you supplement one another's strong suits and where you have weaknesses? And I think there's an application to all of us in business and what we do. And as you mentioned, Chris, these are lessons that I really take into the home, right? As a parent of 2 boys, there are a lot of applications for me in how I lead as a family, or I co-lead with my wife. So it's really a good time of year, and I like this time of year between Memorial Day, between that and July 4th, to spend some time really appreciating what our military does.
Everybody,
Yeah, it's really good.
everybody, this was fantastic. Well, what a wonderful way to close, Sean. I really appreciate that. That was very inspiring. I also, too, side note, you guys know I grew up in Pittsburgh. I'm a huge Steelers fan. I'm a huge Mike Tomlin fan. But I'm going to give you a hint. Check out a podcast called The Pivot, where Ryan Clark interviews Mike Tomlin. And after you listen to Mike Tomlin, you will all be Mike Tomlin fans. You might not be Steeler fans, but you'll be Mike Tomlin fans, because Sean, he talks about leadership. He talks about, you know, what does it mean to serve your guys, right? And he said, you know, a lot of coaches run away from coaching. This guy can't learn. He goes, that's on him, that's on the coach, right? So the idea that there are no bad teams, only bad leaders, really resonates. So that's been a really interesting conversation. So we've got extreme ownership, introduction to programmatic advertising, ultra marathon, and building a story brand, and the biggest bluff. So we'll make sure that we highlight those in the synopsis. Team, that was fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing of your time and of yourselves. Thomas, do we have any questions from the audience?
Yeah, guys, I'm going to pop back on the screen. We do have a couple. The first one's for Dave specifically. So I want to know that your favorite nugget from your book that you put into action most often.
It sounds crazy, but this is the only snack I'm really eating. I've learned from Dean that when hungry and you're craving sweets, have a banana, because it'll eliminate the craving for the sweet and help you for your next run.
Awesome.
I have a run tonight, 7 p.m.
You and both of my sons, if they don't get their banana first thing in the morning, it is mayhem. So I'm all in. And then the other one, I think, Sean, you kind of alluded already that you're back reading that book, but what are each of you reading right now? Anyone?
So I'll jump in. Like I said, I actually just finished the follow-up book to this. So this is the cover, the dichotomy of leadership. It's the follow-up to this. So they talk about, you know, a number of engagements where the book led to a consulting opportunity for Leif and Jacko. And these are now leaders who lean so much into ownership, they're not holding the teams accountable, right? So I think there's a balance. And that's really what they strike on that book. It's a little bit shorter. This one's 265 pages. I think that one's a little bit shorter, but coupled, I think it helps you to find that harmony.
I just finished David McCullough, The Wright Brothers. Highly recommend it. Really, really good. And if you, what's actually, and I could have picked that book for this. It makes you appreciate the work they put into it. I mean, they spent years and years and years and years meticulously getting data, and even now the wing is only marginally more efficient than what they did, 100 years ago. But David McCullough in general, if you've never read 1776, another one of his books. It is maybe the best book I've ever read.
And I'm reading the follow-up, A Runner's High. So this is about 20 years later, and it just proves that age is not a barrier. So once again, the same messaging, but age is not a barrier, and I truly believe in that.
That was going to be a question I was going to ask you, David, was how long ago did he write that book, and what has happened in his life since then?
So this one was about 20 years ago, and
Okay.
he has 5. This is the 5th, and he's got 2 children. He's had some hardships, some mishaps in his family, but I highly recommend his story, even for folks who don't run and aren't into it. It's just the things that he perseveres through, and to see what the human body and mind can do is unbelievable.
That's great.
Wonderful.
I feel like we're all kind of staying in our own inspirational lanes, because the book that I'm reading right now is about SEO, and it's called 3 Months to #1, and it's how to master your search engine performance on Google.
Your next book will be an Excel doc.
That's all.
This
So the book, my really light summer affair, I decided to reread the Iliad by Homer, and freaking lean in, because I love the epic, right? And I just love it. And what I think is interesting about it, and I'll apply it to work, is that there is a beautiful and creative spin to anything you can say, right? So, I mean, there's a lot of action in the Iliad, right? You know, knees buckle, bunch of spears, bunch of swords, all this stuff. But the description of it is so varied, right? So as I started thinking about it, because I mean, Modern does direct marketing, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, how do you say the same thing in more interesting ways? So anyway, there you go.
awesome,
You guys were
guys.
awesome. You guys,
That's amazing.
amazing.
I was shamed, so I walked back to my bookshelf and I found an old book that is not about business in any way, but taught me a lot about business when I was probably 20 years old and I didn't even realize it. And that is Men at Work by George Will.
Oh.
Right? It's maybe one of the greatest baseball books ever written. He focuses on 4 players at the time. It's from 1990, so Tony Gwynn, Cal Ripken are prominently featured, along with Oral Hershiser, the pitcher, and Tony La Russa, the manager. But it really taught me about the consistency of the work you put in, the patterns that you take, the way that you can get away from those patterns when they're not working for you, teamwork, all of these different facets of baseball that I carried. That, you know, I love baseball, and to be able to put these things into action from a business perspective is tremendous. So I highly recommend, if no one's read that, and if I'm telling you that you should read George Will, I'm obviously not talking about politics. So anyway, I appreciate each and every one of you, and I'm currently reading The Dane Curse, which is the second novel by Dashiell Hammett, the hard-boiled LA detective fiction writer. His next book after The Dane Curse, if you're not familiar, you probably will be familiar with his next book, which was The Maltese Falcon. So whenever I miss LA, I tend to read some Dashiell Hammett and go back home a little bit into that vibe. Anyway, thank you all. Wonderful, wonderful roundtable. Really great stuff. We appreciate you all being here. Your next opportunity as an attendee to join us for a Take 20 is next Wednesday, July 6th, when we do a session called The Skinny on DigiNets. Chris will welcome experts on this niche of the TV advertising space from Marathon Ventures and MeTV. Please visit thepdmi.com/take-20 to register for the webinar and check out our upcoming schedule. Also, registration and hotel reservations are open for our next in-person event, PDMI West at Hard Rock Hotel San Diego, October 24th through 26th. I have no idea where that lands in reference to the Ironman event, but maybe we can work on that for 2023. And visit thepdmi.com/PDMI-West for more info. Thank you again for checking out this episode of Take 20. Be well. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.